Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Sarah Trainer and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Engagement here at Monash University. It is great pleasure to welcome you to our Connections for Change webinar. We launched Connections for Change to help the alumni community to adapt and flourish during these challenging times. Over the past 7 weeks, we have shared conversations with alumni and thought leaders across the globe in response to the questions from our alumni community. Today, we're excited to have Katea Cantwell and Katea Gidley with us to share their strategies for alumni and soon-to-be alumni on navigating their careers. With 30 years experience in sales, marketing, strategy and general management in Australia and internationally, Katea co-founded Career Ahead in 2012 as part of a broader career and talent insights group. Katea has a Bachelor of Business in Marketing from Monash University. Recognised as a leading HR and career management expert, Katea has extensive human resources leadership experience gained over 30 years across multiple industry sectors. Katea is also a Monash alumna, achieving a Dean's List Honours for her MBA. Katea and Peter were popular speakers at our Networkathon event last year, and we're delighted to have them back to share their top tips and answers to questions from the alumni community on how to navigate the early stages of your career in this uncertain climate. Thanks, Pete and Katea.
Thanks, Sarah. And welcome, everyone. I can see we've got quite a few people online, which is absolutely fantastic. And we're really delighted at the opportunity to speak with you today. From our perspective, we'd love this to be very much a Q&A session. If you can use chat very actively to raise your questions with us, we will respond to those happily. We have prepared, I guess, some Q&A to run between Peter and myself. And given the overall topic, we've really grouped today's session across 4 themes. The first theme being transitioning from study to work. The second theme being accelerating my career. The third theme being resilience and navigating things that go wrong in your career. And then really some general career guidance that we think is useful to everybody managing their careers in a lifelong sense. So they're the themes that we're going to explore. As I said, pepper your questions in throughout the session, even though we have got some structure here, and we will respond to them as we go. But I am going to start with the first theme, which is transitioning from study to work. And I'm going to put the first question to Pete, which is really about how, as you leave university, do you identify and successfully gain a role that really aligns to your career goals and your core capabilities? Pete, what advice would you give the audience?
So my response to that question is equally relevant to anyone at any stage in their career life cycle. We use a framework anchored around the 3 C's, which is clarity, capability and confidence. So the basis of securing a role all starts from your level of clarity. So whether it's through the structure of a career plan or just self-reflection, getting clear as to what roles or types of roles are you interested in, understanding why you're interested in those roles, but then importantly, within each of those role types, understanding what does it take to be successful, to perform within those roles, and then how does that relate to you? What is it that differentiates you as an individual to be able to perform better than other people for that particular opportunity? The other thing I'd mentioned around, securing roles that align with your career goal is also being clear as to your definition of career success. Whether it's as a graduate or at any other point, often people look at career choices and roles at a high level. So they look at it in terms of role types, role descriptions, role titles, particular companies that they would like to work for, normally because they're aware of them based on their profile. But again, from a self-reflection point of view, understand what are all the elements of a particular job or role? What does it give you? What do you need? Is it all about the job, or is that role or work playing a part of your broader life? So is it just about opportunity and financial return? Is it about the environment that you would like to work within, working with different people, learning from people, the exposures or opportunities it may create for you in the future? What role does work-life balance play? What does that mean to you? What types of environments and ways of working do you thrive in? So really building that clarity and then understanding what is it about you that differentiates yourself to perform better than others in that environment underpins all the efforts of securing the role.
Great response, Pete. And can I just ask you to do one build, because I think it is important for everyone regardless of career stage. I think you shared really well what's underneath identifying the right sort of role and differentiating yourself for that sort of role. But what are your tips for performing well in the very competitive recruitment process? And we have a question from Shaz, which I'll go to next, about some limitations in the job market at the moment. We know that performing well in a selection process is critical. What advice would you give to our audience about that?
So again, the advice is based on understanding the context. So now more than ever, the environment is extremely competitive. So it's about, through a selection process, how do you stand out? And importantly, how do you stand out on those key elements that employers are looking for? So my tips are, as we talked about the clarity, you want to build your personal brand, your proposition, and importantly, your narrative, the way you tell your story, the way you answer your questions, so that it really demonstrates those key differentiators, those key elements that you bring to the table and how that can add value in the context of that particular role opportunity. On that, a lot of people talk about, well, what does that mean from a personal narrative point of view? The examples I give, if you think about brands and products in the marketplace, strong brands have a very clear proposition and they tell their story in a very clear and compelling way. Now, often brands will tell that story across a range of medium and in different environments. So a high-profile brand might tell their story in a 30-second television ad. They might tell it in a radio ad, a 15-second clip, a billboard, a magazine advertisement, through other forms of social media. They will tell their story in store through point of sale material. The thing is that there will be a consistency about each of those stories. They just tell them in different ways. So the example in navigating a search process or a recruitment process is saying, are you telling a consistent story through your networking efforts, through your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your application letters, in your engagements through the interview process? Is there a consistency in the message that you're wanting to deliver to enable you to stand out on those key drivers?
Fantastic. Thanks, Pete. Great to see some questions coming through. So we've got 3 questions from the audience, and I think we might start. And Pete, do you want to ask me Shaz's question?
So in today's climate, obviously the economic downturn, lack of job prospects, limited international travel, what are your thoughts on transitioning careers?
So Shaz, I might ask for a little bit of clarification on the question. And so when you say transitioning careers, do you mean looking for a different career path than the one that you're in or the one that you were planning to go into? Or is it about transitioning from university to work? If you wouldn't mind providing some clarification, I will talk sort of generally to the question. So the first thing I'd say is people are incredibly concerned about today's climate, and I get it. But the reality is, unemployment is, predicted, I think over the next kind of immediate period to hit about 11% in Australia. And I can't talk to other geographies, but I'm certainly not seeing, figures like 40%. You might say unemployment will be in the 10 to 20% range. So looking at the situation positively, 8 out of 10 of you, 9 out of 10 of you, will be able to find employment. I think it then goes to the quality of that opportunity. And if you smooth the job market, or if you evaluate the job market, what's not going to happen is that people, that all roles will be impacted equally. So what we do know is that there's going to be some impact to entry-level roles. And so that might create more of a challenge if you're in your early career than it might for, more experienced people. However, that is just the case. So you need to accept that as a reality. And through great research, start to identify, where the opportunities are. So Shaz has sort of clarified, from a career path point of view, what does it mean? So, science PhD to something with more stability. So I think the first thing you need to do is map all of the possible career paths for your skill set, and for your experience. So one of the tools that we use a lot in our work, and in our business, we work with university partners supporting students and alumni in their career development, but we also work with industry, helping them to identify candidate pools and often to support their accelerated career development. So I can answer this question really from both sides of the coin. And it goes back a little bit to what Pete said. So first of all, look at yourself and understand the skills and capabilities and experiences that you have to offer in an employment context. And then you need to map really what are all of the potential employment and career outcomes that relate to your skill set. And then, Shaz, you might use the evaluation criteria that Pete talked about, which is really about what does career success mean for you? Because what it means for you versus George, who's asked a question, might be two different things. So if you're looking for stability, if you're looking for supported development, if you're looking for a slow and steady career path, you will start to narrow down on the opportunities that best suit you, and you will discard those which might have a higher risk profile. And then you've really got to, and this is what's harder at the moment, you need to do more work on your job hunting. So are there a lot of advertised opportunities at the moment? No. Do I think the hidden job market is alive and well? Yes. And by the hidden job market, it's really the opportunities that you have to find as opposed to those that present themselves. And that means once you're clear on, here's what I have to offer, here's what's important to me, here are the sorts of organisations in which I will find those roles, how do I actively engage with those organisations? So I make sure that I'm doing speculative applications and getting myself on the recruitment systems of those organisations. I'm connecting with alumni who are connected to those organisations just to see if they can help me to identify or sponsor me into opportunities. I am networking more broadly. I'm using LinkedIn in all its capacity to understand what organisations are doing, and I'm monitoring potential job activity, on LinkedIn. So you're really in a very active hunting mode where you're trying to put yourself forward. And I know that people are hiring at the moment, but they're hiring opportunistically. They'll still hire quality candidates. They're not interested in running big recruitment processes at the moment because they're expensive for organisations, and the HR effort is focused elsewhere. But it's about connecting yourself very proactively to that opportunity rather than that opportunity coming to you. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a sense, and I think Pete's going to add.
And I've picked up on a number of the questions here, so my comments will relate to quite a number of them. The first thing, there was a question around looking at different career paths that may have more stability. It's a really interesting question because a lot of career paths that you may perceive as being stable, based on the level of change and challenge, you can't make those assumptions. From a personal experience, I was on the executive board of Foster's, major top 20 ASX listed business. I thought this is an organisation, the career path will be extremely stable. The business has been around for a long time. Within 2.5, 3 years, I was part of the exec team that sold that business to another global multinational. I had the opportunity to stay with the organisation but chose to leave and establish this group of businesses. But I made a comment at the time that it was a fantastic transaction because it would provide stability for the organisation. Within about 5 years later, that SAB Miller sold it to another major global organisation, and everyone said, fantastic, it will provide stability. It has subsequently been sold again. So I think in today's environment, today's world, you've got to be really careful about that assumption of stability. The thing that will provide stability is performance. If you are performing within the role and you are performing better than others, that is your greatest sort of guarantee of stability. So anchor around that. The other thing people ask, how do I identify the right opportunities? How do I transition careers? Fundamentally, it's about creating options that align to what you want to do, but also about your ability to get what you want. You need to give the employer what they want. And fundamentally, they want performance. So the more, to Katea's point, you can understand about the role, to one of the questions that were raised earlier about feedback of fitting into or not fitting into culture, it goes into the research, understanding that culture and then being able to demonstrate your understanding of the culture, why that culture is a good fit for you in the context of enabling you to perform. Now, there was another question about, as graduates or early on in your career, people ask for specific experience. A really interesting question. It's a really easy thing for employers to ask for because what they're really looking for is evidence. Because every candidate will go in and tell the employer that they can do the role, that they can do it well. They'll provide different perspectives as to why they would be a good choice. But ultimately, the employer is looking for data points, evidence points. And the easiest one to ask for is if you've got experience so you can demonstrate that you've done it before elsewhere and delivered results, that's a great source of evidence. If you haven't got that specific experience, what they're looking for is give me other examples, give me other data points that give me confidence to be able to select you and that you'll be able to do a great job. The other thing that when you get into differentiation, it will vary slightly by employer and industry, but for people early on in their career, HR executives, industry leaders will talk a lot about enterprise skills. So they'll talk about enterprise skills, soft skills, 21st century skills, employability competencies, whatever term they use, they will be the non-technical skills, you know, the non-technical knowledge that is key. And the reason it's key is because ultimately it are those things that enable you to apply your qualifications, your technical skills, your technical knowledge in a specific context to drive outcomes. Okay, so a great source of experience and evidence is talking about those aspects of your profile, having great examples and evidence of how you've used those skills in different contexts that ideally are similar or transferable to their culture, their environment, and how you've been able to drive specific outcomes to overcome that generic have you got experience question.
So if I can pick up, I guess, some elements of Adiba and James and George, and even to some extent, Melanie, your question, but we might answer them more specifically. But I think what all of you are talking about are challenges in the selection process and missing out to other candidates. And I think a couple of things. So from an expectation management point of view, Pete and I talk about this a lot. Very often you're applying for a job, there's one job and one successful candidate and then a whole lot of disappointed people. And we really don't like that about selection, because what then happens is you get very generic feedback like, despite being more qualified than most of the candidates, we went for someone who knew the culture of the organisation. George, that's quite difficult to decode. So I want you all to look at, regardless of your life stage, recruitment is a process that you need to do well in. And it's like, you know, you will have built a lot of technical knowledge during your education, technical skills and knowledge. Almost think about recruitment as a process that you need to learn and master. Now, what's difficult about it is when you engage in recruitment, the stakes are high. It tends not to be a learning opportunity. It's a real opportunity, and you're going for an outcome, but you've missed out on that assessment and feedback stage. But go back to the very first answer that Pete gave you about genuinely understanding you know, your proposition and articulating that in a brand. So who am I? What have I got to offer? Why is it better and different than anybody else? And that's the first step, but it's only useful when you apply it to a real role or a real organisation. And that requires genuinely understanding the key selection criteria for the role. So what is it that organisation is looking for in terms of behaviour, experience, knowledge and skills, and as Pete said, both technical and enterprise skills. So that's almost the formula, and you need to be able to write on a page what is it that they're looking for across those parameters, and then how do I tell my story against what they want, and cultural fit will be an important part of that, and the way that people determine cultural fit is really the way you project your behaviours and values in an interview context. So you've got to do a lot of work to, first of all, be able to represent yourself in that way, but you can't represent yourself generically. It's got to be aligned to what it is that organisation is looking for, and you've got to do a lot of preparation for your interviews in order to understand that. And then, sadly, you do have to be the best at doing that when you get into that competitive selection process.
So can I add a comment or a question to you, Katea?
Sure.
So totally agree with everything you just said. The other element that is critical is not just understanding the what, so all those elements, what you're trying to research, what you're trying to get underneath is the why. Why are all those things required? Why are they relevant? And it's often those insights, those connection points, that if you can then articulate your proposition in the context of why those things are important, you will stand out by that much. It won't be funny.
So 2 more encouraging things for you to know. And so as Sarah opened the session in saying, so I spent 30 years in industry, in human resources, and I was the Chief HR Officer in 2 top 20 ASX listed businesses. So I really can give you the employer lens of what people are looking for in recruitment. 7 out of 10 people interview badly. So it's a skill that people haven't learned. So if it's a skill that you can learn and master, you will put yourself to the top of the tree. Probably the other bit of coaching that I will give you, and I understand if many of you are in your early career stages, you rely on your qualifications or your study experience as being pretty critical into, to your value proposition. Employers look at your qualifications very differently. So they're almost a ticket to play or a ticket to the dance rather than being what you will be selected for. So, I go back to George and your point about I am incredibly well qualified, or as the most well qualified, but they went for someone who is a better cultural fit. The reality is employers will do that every time. So what I find in early career candidates is they labour their qualification. They'll talk to things like, grade point average, but they fail to recognise all of the other things that employers are looking for. So whilst your qualification and your experience at Monash is critical, talk to it as much more than your academic experience. Think about those other things that differentiate you, skills, experiences, behaviour and knowledge in a much broader way than just how well you've done academically. And that's going to open up many, many more opportunities to you. So Pete, will I select another question for you there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of great questions.
Okay. So let's go, Ruben, with your question. So question for a friend who's applying for graduate programs. They've got a wide range of experience, corporate and customer service, as well as a great transcript. So we've just talked about that. But they get stuck at the video interview stage of interviews. So Peter, based on what you said, should they weave more evidence into their answers? Great question, Ruben, and I look forward to Pete's answer on this one.
The short answer is yes. What employers are looking for is to feel confident that if they select that individual, they're making a good choice. So the more relevant and compelling evidence that you can provide, the greater your chance of success. The other point that I picked up in the question there is about getting stuck in the video interview process. So often there's 2 types of video interviews. There's what people will talk about now, which is, over Zoom or other platforms, or there is video interviews as part of the screening process, which are pre-recorded and then submitted. One thing we would encourage with the pre-recorded videos where you are responding to set standard questions is in most instances you have the ability to review your video, your answers. You can keep doing that as many times as you need to before you hit submit. So it's a great opportunity to really think about the answers you're providing, think about the impact that you are creating with the way you deliver those over video. And until you're happy that that is the best representation of the message that you're trying to get across, don't hit submit.
Totally agree. And again, it goes to what I've just said before. Interviewing is a process. You need to have a good technique for that process. Video interviewing requires a slightly different technique. So it is more difficult presenting to a screen than it is to a person. And what you can't often do easily is create an interpersonal connection over video. So it's got to be a practice technique. And there are lots of video platforms that will allow you just to register and practice your technique. But Pete's right. So either you practice your interview using some sort of video platform, or you don't send your answers through until you've recorded them and you're happy. But evidence is really what all employers are looking for. So your clarity around the evidence that you can demonstrate that might create value for that employer will improve their confidence and the decision to hire you. But practice would be a really critical tip around understand the process, practice your technique, and do it before you go into a real video situation.
There's a question from Enrique here that really talked about being overqualified, and how do you manage the perceived overqualification. The other part of the question talks about what they would be able to pay or not.
Yeah.
So do you want to
absolutely
respond to that?
So Enrique or Enrique, I'm not sure exactly of the pronunciation, but look, overqualified for the position, being very open and honest with you, is often what employers say to let you down gently. So what they're saying is you're a good candidate, you've got lots of experience, but we've chosen somebody else who is a closer fit to what we're looking for. And so I look at that term overqualification, to really mean less alignment than other people, have had. So it really still falls back to you to present to any employer the things that demonstrate you as most aligned to what they're looking for, which in fact probably means highlighting only the experience that's relevant, not everything that you might be able to offer. In an interview situation, Pete and I have got a golden rule. If you get to interview, here's the question that we recommend everyone always asks at the end of an interview, and that is to the person interviewing you, do you have any concerns about my ability to successfully take on the role, or is there any other information that you would like to have to consider me as a candidate? It's quite a brave question, but the reason it's a good question is it will 9 times out of 10 surface an objection. And so say the objection is, well, we're worried that you're overqualified, or that you have too much experience. What they then might be saying in that situation is, we think you may be dissatisfied in the role. So you've got to decode all of the time what's happening. And that's your opportunity to pitch why you are strongly aligned to the role and why you will create value for that organisation. And that's if it's a real objection rather than an objection to let you down gently. But look at it as a game of snap, or a game of bingo. What employers are trying to do is make sure that, the numbers on your card line up with their chips. They're looking for the candidate who is going to most closely aligned. So over or underqualified doesn't become an issue if you can demonstrate that you have what they're looking for. Okay, so next question. And I think Melanie had an early on question, so I'd really like to go back to that. The 3 things that you think graduates should look for in an employer in the current climate. What are your thoughts on that, Pete?
The brackets in that question, job security versus growth opportunity, national versus boutique. I don't honestly believe that there is one right or wrong answer here. It really it comes down to alignment. So without understanding your particular career definition of success, what particular opportunities you are looking for, obviously you want to go into an opportunity that you have some awareness of its stability or likely time frame. But outside that, your key focus is what are the opportunities that align to those clarity questions. So what are the roles you're interested in? Why are you interested in them? What really drives performance within those roles, and what is it about you that sets you apart from others to do it better? Then it's really a function of options. So what options are available? So what level of choice do you have or not? So I would just anchor at all times in the basics. Going back to that question earlier about competition, I've got quite a pragmatic view on it. Ultimately, it's about one individual and one role. So if there's more than one person going for it, there's competition. your objective, whether you're competing against one person or 100 or 1,000, is to secure that one role. So ultimately, what will secure you the opportunity is what makes you different, not what makes you the same as everyone else. And I'll give you a live example, a discussion yesterday, and why this is relevant for a graduate as it is at someone at the end of their career. The individual was talking about their focus on securing non-executive board roles. So they've had an extremely successful international corporate career. And what was fascinating was they talked about an example where, as a non-executive board member, the CEO had asked for feedback about a suggested meeting agenda, and this person leveraged all their operational commercial leadership experience and provided quite a lot of feedback, but then reflected on it and said, actually, in my role as a non-executive director, it's actually not to provide that level of prescriptive feedback, because the risk of that is it could undermine the CEO in front of other people. It can disempower the CEO. So the reflection was, in this role, where can I add value? What is my role to add value, so that they can apply their skills and experience in a different context, in a different way. So what you should be looking for is, what is it that you bring and how can that add value in that particular role? Is the same whether it's in a highly competitive environment as the one we're going through, or a less competitive environment. If you're competing with one other person, you've got to differentiate yourself on that basis.
So, Pete, I might talk to David's question here about graduate programs for the 2022 intake. So, David says, he's been applying for graduate programs and have fallen short at the final hurdle. David, which I know is incredibly disappointing because they're long processes, and what I can say is, if you're getting to the final hurdle, you are clearly performing well in the process. What I will say to everybody, if you are looking at graduate programs, is that graduate programs are absolutely fantastic, but commonly they only exist in large organisations who have the requirement for a large number of candidates in a generic discipline or a narrow number of generic disciplines. But companies spend a lot of money on their graduate programs, and they're very high profile. And the reality is they are absolutely on the open job market as opposed to the hidden job market. So they are the most competitive form of recruitment that you will ever participate in. And we work for a number of these organisations who run these programs, and they can have up to 1,100 candidates for any individual role. And so whilst they might be an important part of your ideal job hunting process, I go back to what I said earlier. You need to be looking for roles that are openly advertised, including large graduate programs. Look at smaller and medium organisations that are offering graduate roles, but go hunting on the hidden job market for opportunities and organisations that are going to align to your career goals, but also the capabilities that you have to offer. And if you start to develop, and this is another process. So just like getting through recruitment is a process, you need to have a job search strategy. So after you've identified who you are, what you have to offer, how you can articulate that as your personal brand, how you can then align that to what employers might be looking for, that will give you a strong sense of where the opportunities are. And then you need, and an ongoing strategy. So David, if you're looking for 2021 or 2022, at least you've got a runway. How do you start to get yourself in front of those opportunities? So the events that Monash create for you, joining professional associations as a student member, networking through alumni, hoping that you might get connected to opportunity. Asking people who are in the sorts of jobs that you're interested in, for advice. Pete's got a great saying, and he uses it all the time, and it's absolutely spot on. Ask for advice and you might get a job. ask for a job and you might get advice. So start to build a network and build an understanding of what people are looking for, when they might be looking for it, what their selection processes are going to be. And I think if you've got more than one prong, or one string to your bow, the reality is you are more likely to get an opportunity than if you just keep reapplying for those big graduate programs which are highly, highly competitive. Still work really hard to perform well in them. So at least now, David, you've got the experience of participating in those programs. If you can, understand where you're falling short and why you're falling short and try to bridge those skills. But what I would say to you is make sure you're using multiple strategies to find opportunities. The second part of your question, do I think people will be increasing their 2022 intake? I don't know, but I think not. So I'm giving you an opinion, not a fact. And the reason I say I think not is because it takes an organisation a lot to manage a graduate intake. So effectively, because it's a very structured program, there are typically a number of roles, there are development opportunities, they need to allocate organisational mentors and so on and so forth. I can't see them upping the internal resource, to bridge the gap. But what that might mean is where they haven't hired a lot into their formal graduate programs, they may be looking for graduate candidates to go into roles. So I hope that answers your question. And as I said, you may already be investing in those multiple strategies, but for all of you, make sure you're tapping into that hidden job market and create opportunities yourself through really proactive job hunting.
Again, just to add to that, for anyone looking at graduate roles or going through graduate programs, being able to articulate and differentiate yourself with great examples around those enterprise skills is critical, because they'll do the screening process, and being very honest and I don't believe biased, the fact that you are Monash graduates will automatically separate you out from the majority of other university graduates in Australia and, quite frankly, the majority around the world. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you've got into Monash, the fact that you graduate from Monash, automatically has a perception, a recognition in the marketplace. So that's your ticket to play, as Katea talked about earlier. But what most employers will say now at a graduate level, they will back themselves to be able to teach you elements of the technical skills and knowledge you require to be successful within their organisation. What they're looking for is what separates you out in terms of those other enterprise skills, other characteristics, other value sets that, one, align with their organisation but also demonstrate your potential. Okay? So think about it in two buckets. What are the tickets to play in those graduate programs? And you'll only get through if you've got those. Then the game changes. The other thing that I just want to add quickly in terms of that, ask for a job, you might get advice. Ask for advice, you might get a job. It's a competitive environment, so look for ways to tip the game to your advantage. The best way you can do that is building that deeper understanding of the why. What are those insights? Create those networks. Why wait for an open, competitive environment? Right? You want to be known. If you can be known before the game even starts, you're at an advantage. If you can be known because of your quality questions, the fact that you've asked for advice, why is that relevant? Because it demonstrates you're willing to learn, you're willing to listen, you're willing to invest in your own development. The game hasn't even started yet, and automatically you put yourself out and ahead of other candidates that will have just gone through the formal application process.
So Pete, kind of a nice segue to Reynaldi's question. So from our perspective, what are the most in-demand hard and soft skills in today's workforce? Reynaldi, we love this question. We talk about this all the time. So I think, we will both have a perspective to share.
So let me share a blunt assessment that I shake my head at. There's this growing area of 21st century skills and soft skills. And the majority of times we ask graduates or this topic comes up, they say communication skills, relationship skills, problem-solving skills. So my first response is, can anyone tell me of a particular point in history where being able to communicate, interact with other people and solve problems was never a relevant skill set? And no one can answer that. The other point is they're generic. What does communication skills, problem-solving skills, dealing with others mean at that level? The key is context. The key is application. So therefore, you can take those three elements, because they're the ones that are most commonly requested, and there's a lot of research out there that will show you the frequency that these types of skills are requested in job ads or job briefs. The opportunity is in the relevant application within particular contexts. So, communication skills. Well, when, why, how are you going to be using aspects of communication to drive performance? Interpersonal skills. What context? You know, is it interpersonal skills where you are working very closely and cooperating and collaborating with large teams and lots of different people? Is it about working in very structured, hierarchical environments? The key is not the enterprise skill, it's the relevant application of that skill to drive performance within different operating contexts.
And I think that goes back to evidence. So again, there's lots of data available, Rinaldi, on this. There's a really good report that Nous Group, and it's publicly available, prepared recently using data from an organisation called Burning Glass. Burning Glass fundamentally analyse global job boards, and they extract from that insights about workforce trends. And certainly in that report, it talked about the most highly valued soft skills, or I think as they're more commonly called today, enterprise skills, and they're the skills that help you to perform most effectively in work. But as Pete said, they're fairly generic when they're reported back, and they're always communication skills, problem-solving skills, you know, relationship management skills. All of those things are important, but you know, it's like saying communication skills, like saying science. You know, the reality is you need to understand what aspects of communication are useful in the job that you're looking for, and that's about decoding the key selection criteria for the sorts of roles that you're looking for. So being able to understand for you and what your career goals are, unpack those high-level enterprise skills and look to create evidence that you have those skills and that you've applied them in a range of different contexts. But generically, you will be able to find heaps of information about the hard and soft skills that are in demand. You know, digital and technology skill sets are definitely sought after, but again, unpacking that, there's a lot that sits underneath it. So I'd go back to you, Rinaldi, and what you want to do, and so therefore understand the hard and soft skills that are relevant for your career goals and be able to create evidence. The next question I really like from Raksha about really experience. So as an entry-level applicant, how do you demonstrate a willingness to learn, but also where job ads specify X years of experience, you know, how do you manage that as an entry-level applicant? And again, it's a great question and we get it often. So Pete, your thoughts?
So in terms of the first thing, how do you demonstrate willingness to learn without coming across that you don't have everything they require? You probably demonstrate that in a number of different ways. It's your approach and attitude. So often a trap people fall into in interviews is needing to answer every single question, to be the font of all knowledge. The first bit is about being authentic. So if you get asked about a particular area or a particular experience and you don't have it, be honest. Don't try and spin it. Don't try and cover it up. Demonstrate your understanding as to why that is a relevant area, and demonstrate through the way you positively engage, because that will breed confidence, the fact that you're not trying to spin it, you're being authentic, you're being honest about what you have got and what you haven't got, but say you understand why it's relevant and therefore the steps you could take, your willingness to be able to develop those skills or develop that knowledge, as you have done with another example. So, for example, I was operating in a particular project area. I didn't have this. I sought advice. I did extra research. I built my understanding so that I was able to develop these skills, and then I was able to apply them in that same context or a different one, so that they can see you're not just saying all the right stuff about, oh, well, I'm willing to learn. You're saying, here's why I recognise that it's a gap and it's relevant, and here's another example where I've done it and applied those learnings to drive different outcomes.
And can I talk to the concept of experience? And with early career candidates, I do talk about this all of the time. So often you'll see X years of experience in an ad, and a couple of things will happen. So people go, I don't have it, so I'm not going to apply. Experience will be interpreted as 2 years of experience, in an entry-level IT role, which is impossible for graduates to have. So you need to back yourself that effectively you will represent as a good candidate, so take the opportunity. But you need to package your experience differently. And it goes to a lot of what we've already said. So yes, paid work experience in your career path is ideal, but the reality is for many of you early in your career, you need to package up the rest of your experiences in a way that relates to the opportunity. So what leadership experience have you had, which might be in university clubs or societies, or, it might be volunteering. It might be casual work experience that you've had, which have built some skills and experiences that might be relevant. It might be work integrated learning opportunities that you had during your degree. It might be the project work that you have done within your academic program that's helped you to build the sorts of skills and technical knowledge that employers are looking for. So it's really the way you package up that experience and relate it to what the organisation is looking for, that then creates, the idea that you do have relevant experience and you can create value. So you have to take a liberal view of what experience means. And I almost, when I coach individual students, what I recommend is that they literally write out what their experience profile is. And I like to use the parameters of knowledge, behaviour, experience, and technical and enterprise skills. Write down the inventory that is you, and then write down the evidence that you could use in an interview situation that you have had that experience, that you do have that capability. And that will instantaneously improve your personal confidence, which means you'll perform better in a selection process, but it will allow you in a free-flowing way to provide relevant evidence to a potential employer in a recruitment situation.
Can I just build on that one really quickly? Yep. Katea's talked about practice. A competitive environment's also about benchmarks. So I often say to people, don't practice your answers or assessing the impact of this evidence for the first time in the interview or the selection process. Take the roles you're interested in, take an advertisement, take a job brief or a job description, prepare for it and engage others. They may be friends, they may be fellow students, fellow alumni, other people within your network, give them the job brief, the role, the ad, give them the context, get them to ask you questions, get feedback from them about your responses to potential questions, the examples, the evidence you're going to provide, and say to them, how compelling was that? How impactful was that? Did that come across clearly? Did that build confidence in them that you could really do the job? And they don't have to be an expert in the role, because it's about that impact. So not only practice, but really practice against relevant benchmarks and people that will give you good quality feedback so that you can understand where you're at, because the more grounded you are, the more practiced you are, your confidence will go up. If your confidence is up, the individual you're engaging with, their confidence will be up, and it will underpin greater chance of success.
And we do need to wrap up and hand back to Sarah, but many of you in the questions have asked about how do you improve your interview technique. So the reality is you are working with a fantastic organisation that is Monash, and so there are lots of resources that are available to you. Certainly there are now platforms like Seek, which provide a lot of career advice and guidance. But as Pete said, I think don't underestimate practicing with people in your network, tapping into the broader alumni community. Again, it might be if you have availed yourself of a mentor, one of the things you might ask them to do is do some practice interviews, with you. But it is that process, as I said, start with you, understand who you are and what you offer, define career success, so make sure that the opportunities you're seeking align to that. Understand the recruitment process, break it down, work out what it is that you're going to need to do to perform at every stage, and then practice. And I think, as I said, from an encouraging perspective, and I can say this from a lot of experience, 7 out of 10 people don't perform well. So if you can lift your interview performance, you are going to be in the box seat for opportunity. And then my other final advice is, if your single strategy is to find jobs through applying for advertised roles, you are going to be more often than not disappointed because it's really competitive. Get yourself active in that hidden job market. Pete, anything you want to wrap up on before we go back to Sarah?
My last comment, where I started thinking about clarity, capability and confidence. Be honest with yourself. If you do not feel confident, it is most likely that you've got gaps in your clarity, or you don't have the capability required to be successful. Use that to focus your development, your next steps, your practice, what you need to do to fill those gaps in the clarity and capability. Because if you do that and continually to challenge yourself, you will get the outcomes you're targeting.
Thank you so much, Peter and Katea, for asking our alumni communities questions and providing such practical solutions. I think everyone would agree there's so many excellent examples to, all of the questions that were posed today. I think it's really evidence that Pete and Katea have really extensive experience in this area, and we're really excited to let you know today that we have partnered with Career Ahead to provide a personal coaching session for up to 10 members of the Monash alumni community. This is being run as part of our alumni to alumni mentoring offer and includes a career transition coaching, which is ideal for alumni who are seeking to manage a career change, to find a new role or access guidance on career direction. The other option is career expert coaching. This is ideal for alumni seeking to engage with a coach from their target area of discipline to gain specific vocational or professional advice. Alumni can register their interest via the Alumni to Alumni mentoring platform, and keep an eye on your inbox next week for further details. I think just in follow-up to Katea's point, I think one of the really good examples is the opportunity to practice some of these skills with a mentor. And I just want to remind everyone that we do have the Monash Alumni to Alumni mentoring program. So please, reach out and connect with other fellow alumni who can really provide the support and leadership and guidance in this sort of area. If you're a Monash graduate, make sure you join the official Monash Alumni LinkedIn group to access more exclusive content of the Connection to Change. from alumni across the globe and a recording of this webinar. To those of you who are in your final year of study at Monash, we look forward to warmly welcoming you into this group and the alumni community at the conclusion of your study. Thanks again to Peter and Katea, and thank you to everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.